Hello and welcome back to the Atmosphere Electric. I'm Rich and there's Fran. How are you, bud?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, man. Chasing the dream, living the dream, being chased by something. I don't know. But it's going well. It's all right. It's all good. Half-term week, so more stressful than a normal working week, to be honest with you. But we're nearly there. We're halfway through.
Tell me about it.
First world problems. Oh, anyway, let's get straight into it because obviously loads to catch up on. Obviously, there is currently a midweek round of fixtures in the Champions League, which has thrown up all kinds of weird and wonderful connotations. But this week we start at a really interesting venue and a really interesting game, and it's Friday night football, which I actually quite enjoying. Leicester host Brentford. Now, both of those teams, I can see winning this game, Fran. But let's start with Leicester, who actually, off the back of fan protest at the weekend, I thought put in an absolute shift against Arsenal. I thought there was some real improvement defensively, and they looked like they had a little bit on the break too. Do you feel that this could be a turning point for Leicester? Not suggesting they're going to go and finish in the European places, but do you think that this might be their new system, their new way of playing if they can keep everyone fit?
Do you know what? I'm going to go early.
Banker of the week?
Brentford are my banker of the week.
I tried everything then. I really tried to build it up.
I agree with everything you said. And, defensively, I thought it was so much better from Leicester. Up until the goal, which, to be honest, both goals were defensive mistakes, which I think just highlights Leicester's problems. But up until the initial goal from Marino, I thought Leicester looked rock solid, didn't look like conceding, snuffed out all the idea and creativity from Arsenal. I thought it was a decent performance. I think the one thing you can say is that Leicester have now gone, 5 home Premier League games without scoring. They just don't look like scoring. There was a couple of breaks, wasn't there, really? And there was one half-decent chance, which Arsenal managed to defend quite well. But generally, Leicester don't have a lot going forward. Their average age of the front three is something like 74. You can see why Leicester aren't winning games and scoring goals. But I agree entirely on the defensive side. I think Okoli and Ndidi coming into that team and Hermanson have made such a difference. Defensively look stronger. I just think Brentford, I think they've won 3 on the bounce away from home now. They have got goals in their side and defensively seem to have tightened up as well. So for me, I just think it screams a Brentford win. Comfortable Brentford win.
And do you think, so moving on to Brentford side, do you think that that's just because actually Brentford, possibly more than anybody else in the league, just know their system, don't they?
100%.
They know what they're doing. They know when they're supposed to be doing it. They do the basics really bloody well. They really do. And I'm sure you've seen it behind the scenes that they're doing some really good stuff to kind of garner that sort of family feeling amongst the squad. No big names as such, but just everybody knows their job. And as typified by last week, going to London Stadium, beating West Ham 1-0, minimal fuss in reality, 3 points on the board. Just doing a fantastic job, aren't they?
Do you know what I think this game is interesting for is Leicester have a reputation of being a family club, which, with the things that are coming out after the protest, with people being banned for silly reasons. I've seen ill supporters trying to move their season ticket because, they've got operations, those sorts of things, and the club are just denying it, trying to resell their tickets for more profit. You put that against Brentford, who are the best, I think they're the best run club, not from a financial point of view, commercial point of view, but from the way that they're run, the way that they treat their fans, I think they are the best run club in the country. I think it's chalk and cheese when you compare the ownership and the way that they treat their fans. I think it's chalk and cheese. So I think that element of the game as well is interesting. So it'd be interesting to see if the fans do carry on the protest, because they say in the opposite corner of the ground, they're going to have fans who are being treated like absolute kings.
That is a worrying trend currently. You just need to follow any of the social medias, any of the fans of social medias right now. Clubs banning people for ridiculous. There's a bunch of Man United fans that have been kicked out because they left early last week in the Champions League game. Not Champions League game, the Europa League game. And I think it was Rangers, when they played Rangers, and Rangers fans then went and sat in their seat because they'd left, and they're then being banned because they're saying that you didn't come to the ground. And so, clubs just really, really need to get a grip of themselves here because, the lifeblood of the club will always be the fact. I understand the financial impact of TV, but being honest with you, that won't last forever because the TV model is about to implode as well. So they need to be very careful of who they upset and offend here.
Well, to take it to a sort of different tangent is you look at Luton as an example. You've seen that you can be relegated from the Premier League and you can be bottom of the Championship and go into League One. Now, that may or may not happen, but you then look at teams like Leicester's, Ipswich, Southampton's, Wolves. There's a possibility there that could happen to you. So you need your fans. Like, there isn't going to always be TV money, is there? You drop into the Championship, drop into League One, like the money will just disappear. So you need your fans you need them on board. They're the lifeblood of the club. So you keep upsetting your fans, they will disappear. They will go.
Yeah, they absolutely will. Like I say, plea to all clubs, just be human. Just understand that people are people and give them a bit of grace. And by the way, if they've paid their money, they're probably allowed to have an opinion as well. So let them have it, as long as it's not illegal in what they do or say.
That's the biggest thing, isn't it? People are being scared now to almost rebel against the club because they're scared of being banned. They're scared of, having the club that they support ban them and not being able to attend. That's just ridiculous. As long as, like you said, the protest or what you're saying is not illegal, you're not threatening, people or whatever it is. If you're just trying to, say to the club this isn't good enough and you want change, that's absolutely fine.
Should be. I mean, obviously, there's I don't know how true it is, but there's obviously currently at the moment German police going around knocking on people's doors, arresting them because they're putting memes on social media. Like we're in real danger of morphing into some dystopian nightmare, aren't we? But let's not go down that route. That's a different podcast. That's the
Welcome to the two-tier gear.
Moving on. So Friday night's your banker. Interestingly, Saturday morning is my banker of the week. Everton host Manchester United. Everybody thinks Man United. Of course, I'm joking. Everton for me is an absolute shoe-in to win this one. For a couple of reasons. Let's start with Everton. The turnaround under Moyes has been phenomenal, hasn't it? They look like a completely rejuvenated team. He's got Beto scoring goals, but managed to keep that defensive solidity. He looks like he's almost done everything we thought Sean Dyche might have done, but with a little bit better.
It's almost something he's not renowned for. He's like, if reputational wise, you would have said that it's a bit of a like for like replacement, really, wouldn't you? But there's flair and creativity coming. I don't know where it's coming from. You've got people like Idrissa Gueye, who all of a sudden looks an absolute baller. Like he's just renowned for his tackling ability, really. But some of the players have just found different levels and gears and abilities under Moyes. So full credit to Everton for hiring the right man at the right time. And, I agree with you. This was very close to being my banker. I went for Brentford because I just think it's a bit more of an easier fixture. But Everton is the value banker as well. This is the 2-1. Like that's just, to me, I'm going to say it now. The bound to go and lose now, but that is an absolute gift.
Yeah, I think based on the way the Champions League fixtures are going this week, we need to be careful of what we think is going to happen because we definitely didn't get any of them right last night. But for me, I think they're now 6-4 on my, because they're in my £5 challenge and banker of the week. So they're 6-4 currently, which still feels massively over odds at home. Again, I know we're almost doing this sort of Goodison Park farewell tour, but the last time a Man United, a massive club, are coming to Goodison Park, the fans are buzzing because they've now done their first event in the new stadium. So that's kind of growing some more interest. They're in a good spot. They're moving up. They're looking up the league, not down the league. And for me, that break that David Moyes had between West Ham and Everton has done him the world of good because I think it's given him a chance to go and redefine himself a little bit because wrongly, all the West Ham, he got kicked out of West Ham basically for style of football he was playing, not because he wasn't successful. And so I think he's adapted it slightly. And this could be the marriage made in heaven if it continues like this.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm really pleased for him as well because after what he achieved at West Ham, I thought he was treated really poorly, to be honest. Just on a side note, did you see the absolute tramp that went into the new grounds? Bramley Moore is called, and went and ordered his food from the kiosk and then asked for a coffee and walked away and nicked it, and he was put it on social media and was laughing about it.
Huh?
What a tramp. Why are you doing that, mate? You've gone in there as a fan and you've literally ripped them off. It's your club, you absolute idiot. Just stealing.
Sure it was their club. Are you sure it wasn't a Liverpool fan?
No, it was an Everton fan, definitely. And he'd put it on there. He says, I'm the first person to nick from the club. And everyone was like, what are you doing? So, yeah, absolute idiot.
Yeah, there's too many of them, I'm afraid. You could argue there's too many of them in the Man United squad at the moment. Going from, the happiness, the buzz around Everton right now. Is there a darker place to be than currently a Man United fan? I mean, they are literally, they've given up on the season, haven't they?
Oh, I gave up on the season a long time ago. I think the only one who's not given up on the season is Amarim because he's feeling the heat now. And again, we've said this before. I feel for him so much because he's just been sold. He's been sold down the river, hasn't he? Didn't want to come in the summer, told he had to. Was given one player in the window. Now, I've had people on social media X saying, "Oh, United are hamstrung by PSR." You're hamstrung because you've been buying bad players. It's not because of the club you are. The rules work for you. It's because of the club it's because of the bad purchases you made. You go through that squad. I put a tweet out, I think it was yesterday, to say, when was the last player United bought that could be classed as a success? In my opinion, I think it's Zlatan. Like,
Would you not say Martinez? I know he's injured regularly, but Martinez.
no, I don't. I wouldn't even class him as a success. Somebody said Bruno Fernandes. I think he's had one good year. The rest of it would be classed as a flop. Like, for me, I think it's Zlatan, and he was free.
That does definitely make it a bit more appealing, doesn't it? I think it's not a secret. It's not a surprise to people when you talk about the money they've spent. You look at Onana, the number they spent on Onana for a goalkeeper when there's so many better options. Lenny Yoro. Again, potential, but you'd argue they overpaid for De Ligt. They definitely overpaid for Maguire. The list goes on and on and on. And then now, kind of, Ugarte, Casemiro, both overly, But that's the trouble with Man United, is that because they lost their identity for me, they were just sort of signing players depending on who the next manager sort of fancied. Højlund's a great example of
Højlund, Xerxes, like you could just keep going and going and going. I did think of the display against Spurs. I thought the one positive was Xerxes, though. I thought he had some really nice touches, showed some ability. I thought the rest of the players just weren't on his wavelength.
Yeah, they're in trouble, mate. Like I said, they're not in a good spot. I don't see, obviously they're still in the Europa League. The injury to Diallo probably sees that done and dusted now. They're not the threat going forward. They created a couple of chances at the weekend. Didn't really like scoring them. Garnacho probably could have had two, but didn't look like scoring either of them. I don't know where their goal comes from. They don't keep clean sheets. They are literally hoping for a wonder window in the summer, because otherwise Man United could become irrelevant very, very quickly. If you look at the two teams we're talking about now, if you ask me now to put a fiver on who's going to finish high next season, Everton or Man United, not even half a beat is Everton.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the only thing that United fans will be banking on will be in the summer, Amarim clears out those players that he doesn't want, which is going to be pretty much most of them, and they allow him to rebuild within his own image, and that they allow him to do that, with his own players, not signing random players. That's the only hope they've got. But would you be confident that they do that? They've got no director of football at the minute. I don't think. So who's going to be directing the transfer business? They're going to struggle to shift players based on the wages that they're on. You've seen with Rashford, it's taken nearly a year to get Rashford out because of the wages he's on.
Well, and the interesting thing around that for me is that actually they've still got a lot of players to come back, so they're all on loan. Sancho is an example.
They're still coming back, and they've actually publicly criticising the club. So there's potential that they come back after publicly criticising the club.
Was Sancho on an obligation or an option?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Or was it just a dry loan, as they now call it?
I think that's interesting because his form has dipped, hasn't it, for Chelsea? So it'll be interesting to see whether Chelsea do, if there is an obligation or a clause in there, whether they do actually sign him. Because if he doesn't, he's going to be going back to United after. Well, he's wrote freedom on about 3 or 4 players now, hasn't he, on their Instagrams?
Yeah, which leads you to believe that there probably is an obligation to buy, right? Because you probably would be quite survival if. Interestingly, I speak to a lot of Chelsea fans, and they're really happy with him. Like they really like him. But for me, like you say, I think he started off all right, but he's on the sort of downward trajectory.
Yeah, I like him. I just don't think he does enough with his end product, does he? Really?
No, but there's a few people that we can come on to around that problem. And like I say, for me, this is a great way to start the footballing day on Saturday. Looking forward to that. And again, I would just like to say, sort of watched quite a lot of the footage of the new stadium. For me, it just looks like another one of these soulless, empty bowls in Goodison Park. I don't think it'll be long before you see Everton fans crying back out for those days at Goodison Park with that atmosphere. But I understand. that football moves on, and we need to find ways of getting more people in the stadium. But I think Everton will actually miss Goodison Park more than they think they do, or will, when it's finally gone.
The one thing that I have noticed about it is when you look at the pictures, it is quite a steep stadium, so you are on top of it, and I think that's a big difference to some of the newer stadiums that you have seen. So I think they will create an atmosphere in there, but none of the new they're just not like the old stadiums, are they? I don't think then that you will ever create atmospheres, like the Boleyn Ground, West Ham, like they're the ones that are kicking off the most. I don't think you are going to create those sort of atmospheres, but I do think this it is slightly different design because it does look quite steep and you are on top of the pitch. Like I saw a few images from literally the back row and you're not far away. So I think that's got a bit more potential than some of the newer stadiums, but I agree.
Well, leads us nicely onto two teams that are still probably arguing whether they would rather be in their old stadiums. Arsenal host West Ham at the Emirates. The one thing I will say about Arsenal at the weekend, and we've already touched on briefly when talking about Leicester, is that as soon as Mourinho came on, they looked like a different outfit. When Mourinho came on, he looked like the player that everybody's been telling me Kai Havertz is. He looked like the midfield player that could score. Both of his goals were what you would call stereotypical centre-forward goals. Whether they were defensive errors or not, he was in the right place, looked assured. And for me, that will be their centre-forward now for the rest of the season. He's gone straight in my fantasy team as a £6 million midfield player who's going to be playing centre-forward and actually potentially offers him that option. But what I will say is I thought, and Nweri was carrying the rest. I thought Sterling looks off. Trossard looked like they are still very, very light in that front three, aren't they?
Yeah, I messaged a couple of my mates who are Arsenal fans and I said a few takeaways from the game is that Arsenal won't be winning the league. No. Haven't got enough. No chance. However, Nweri looks unbelievable. I'd be shocked if he's not in the next England squad. It's going to be very, very tough for Saka to get back in. I mean, I think he looks that good. I mean, all they'll do is they'll have to shift one out to the left and we'll put one on the right. But from the actual who plays on the right, it's going to be very hard to displace him. He looks an unbelievable talent. Like I said, he completely carried that Arsenal team. And what is he, 17, 18? Yeah. Like, there's serious potential there. And England have got another player on their hands there, along with Lewis Skelly as well. I think he looks a very good player. Like there's some good players coming through the Arsenal academy, and where he's definitely the one. But like you said, I think Mourinho has to start up front because Sterling looks completely finished and shot. They've got to bench him. Trossard, I like Trossard, but I've never been a huge fan. He's not going to carry you to a Premier League title, so they have to do something because if they carry on with the front three that started, there's no way they get anywhere near that title. Because if I said to you, predict the West Ham game now, I don't think you'd be far off saying that they're not going to score any more than one goal.
Arsenal.
Yeah. If you were to predict more than one, I think most people look at you and go, really?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, but both teams at the moment actually look a little bit light in the forward areas. I think both teams are obviously missing some players, but also going to need to go and sort of rejig it in the summer quite massively. West Ham very quietly have hit a really bad run of form, losing 2-0 to Crystal Palace, drawing 1-0 with Villa, and again, arguably, lost to Chelsea, lost to Brentford at the weekend without scoring. At the moment, West Ham have gone from, and they're, of course, they're miles clear, right? They're on 27 points, so we're not talking about, but they are still in 16th place. Graham Potter has come in and hasn't actually kind of moved the dial massively. Now, this weekend is going to be a real test for both teams for me.
Yeah, I think the one thing you could say about Potter and West Ham is they do seem a bit similar to Moyes. They do seem a good match, but it's going to take a lot of time to turn them from a style which has been there for 3-4 seasons into a very different style. So they're going to have to work hard, get some new players, and it's going to take time. And I think, like you said, that they've got such a buffer that he should be allowed to do that without having any pressure. But if it continues the way they are going, where they don't look threatening, it does look an old Brighton Potter team where they're just not scoring goals. Like, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough period for West Ham fans because even though they will be seeing improvement in the style of play, results do matter, don't they?
Well, they absolutely do. And like I say, coming in during the season is always difficult. Like you say, you're kind of inheriting squads and behaviours and training methods and all that kind of good stuff. But West Ham will be desperate. And this would be the sort of statement victory that actually could re-kick their season on, to go and beat West Ham at sorry, to go and beat Arsenal at the Emirates would be a real confidence booster, shot in the arm, and potentially see them go on a bit of a run now, which obviously, no doubt, the fans are needing, because I think the West Ham fans feel a bit empty in the sense they've got nothing to play for. In reality, they can't really moan at the manager anymore because he's been changed. So that's why now it's no coincidence that people are starting to kick off about the stadium again, because they don't know who else to kind of kick off about.
Yeah. And some of the things I've seen on the stadium, like, I knew that it was a problem, but I wasn't quite aware of some of the issues that were around it. Like, I knew that the travel was an issue, but then when I've seen details of it, it's an absolute shocker, isn't it? And I've seen so many things online now where they're campaigning to move grounds, and they don't care the income that it generates. Like, it is all about the game and the atmosphere and the experience. So that'll be one to keep an eye out as well.
It won't, because they've got such a good deal on the stadium, mate, that there's no way that they're going to go and spend £1 billion on building their own stadium now. There's not a chance, because they've got such a good deal on that they're there for the long term, I'm afraid. And just because business-wise the fans can kick off all they want, it just doesn't make any sense for them to, like I say, now to build a stadium with the rising costs. I don't think you could build a 40,000. I don't know how much the Everton one has cost, but you're going to be talking about at least 500, 600 million quid at the bargain bucket end.
It'll be interesting though, because if you've got that stadium and the atmosphere is not great, but you're doing well, and that equates then to improvements in the squad. But when you're not doing well, fans will be kicking off, and if that means that they stop turning up, eventually it will have some impact. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens.
For as long as the Premier League is the Premier League, though, and again that's an area for us to one day maybe look at, because it might not be. You'll always get the tourist fan going there because it is in London. Transport isn't great, but if you're in and around London, it's not. Like I say, they'll always get 50,000 there, that's for sure. But whether that's enough to move the team forward, and again, we spoke many times about how they won the transfer window, yet their squad looks paper thin, cracks everywhere, missing players all over the place. We're not talking about any of the players that West Ham signed last summer. We're not talking about any of them as having an impact on the Premier League at all this season.
No. I think there's one, and that's probably Wan-Bissaka. I think he's possibly the one who's come out of it, isn't he? But like you said, it's not really. Defenders don't make impacts, really, do they?
Yeah, I would say he's doing the job that he's paid to do. If I'm honest with you, I don't think he's setting the league. I mean, when you talk about Jed Spence, for example, who's came in out of the cold and is now turning in man of the match performances. Everybody's talking about he must be a shoo-in for England. He's almost single-handedly keeping. Like, the difference in that's what I'm talking about. Impact is that Wan-Bissaka was, I think he's cost about 85 million quid over his 2 transfers to Man U back to you'd be expecting him to impose himself on the league a bit more than he has.
Yeah, just on the Jed Spence, what a player! What a player!
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Funny, but
we'll obviously get him on Spurs, but
completely kicked out of the squad. Yeah, anyway, I always love these stories in all kinds of life where you've been kind of told you're not good enough by X amount of people. You come back and you prove everybody wrong once you make that decision to do that. But before we get to Ipswich Spurs, we have to go to the Vitality Stadium. Bournemouth host Wolves. Was this again another contender for Banker of the Week? Can you see anything other than a pretty comfortable, very easy home victory here?
Yeah, and it's probably not a reflection on Wolves, because I thought Wolves put up a really good performance against Liverpool, and then I thought that they've shown that they're a lot stronger than the bottom 3, I'd say. But I think this is more a reflection on how good Bournemouth are at the minute, to be honest, rather than Wolves. I just think they're going to have too much. I think they're going to score too many goals, and their centre-back pairing that they've got at the minute, Zabani and Huijsen, quite possibly has an argument for being the best in the league. I just can't see anything but a home win here. I just think that they're far too good at the minute.
If Bournemouth win, Man City lose, Bournemouth above Man City, you look at Bournemouth's last 5 fixtures, right? If you didn't know the results, and I said that Bournemouth are going to play Chelsea, Newcastle, so Chelsea away, Newcastle away, Notts Forest at home, Liverpool at home, Southampton away, and I asked you to guess how many points you'd probably say 4? 3 or 4, yeah. For them to come away with 10 points from those 5 games is just testament to what they're doing. I expect nothing but a home win here, relatively comfortable. Like you say, that's no indictment on Wolves at all, who actually might have turned a bit of a corner themselves. Just Bournemouth are operating at a different level to Wolves at the moment, and therefore, at home, I see nothing but a relatively comfortable home win.
Yeah, I hate doing this as well, because I hate it when clubs are being successful and you start selling off their players and the manager, but there's no way Areola is there next year.
No.
And I hate doing it, but he is operating at a level miles beyond Bournemouth at the minute, and I mean that with the greatest respect. It's just going to be so hard for them to keep him because what he's doing there is nothing short of miraculous. Like the injuries that they've got, and they just keep churning out results, and some of the players they've got that are just outperforming their general level. Like it's every player though; it's not just the odd one. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you just said there. I guess the only point is which club. You know, if I go down the league, you know,
where does he go? Is the point, isn't it?
Yeah, like I said, you know, you'd say Chelsea might be looking for a new manager if it carries on the way it's going, and possibly Spurs. You know, if you think about where the board, if he was available, they're the two teams, and of course, I think he would go to both of those teams over Bournemouth. That's no disrespect to Bournemouth, you know, like you say, over Bournemouth. Having said that, if Bournemouth could make Champions League, and I can't believe that sentence has just been said, imagine a season where Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth both made Champions League in the same season.
I think it'd be amazing. I think it'd be amazing just to break up the status quo, wouldn't it? And to say, do you know what, you big guys have underperformed for so long. You've been ran so poorly. You deserve this. Other clubs that have been ran well deserve this, and you need to take some medicine. You need to go away and actually learn some lessons.
And we spoke about it before, and again, we spoke about ownership many times last week. You know, you sort of spoke about who's doing well. I remember seeing the interview on TNT Sports of the Bournemouth owner when he came over from America and was talking about this sort of 5-year Champions League plan. It's just hit me right in the ghoulies there that they're well ahead of schedule currently. You know, they could very well be in and around it with that fifth place, extra place this year going to, looks like England or an English team. Bournemouth could very well see themselves in the Champions League, which would be, like you say, phenomenal. And that would be what would keep Iraola at Bournemouth, I believe, to have a run in the Champions League.
I think, like you just said, that's the only way that he stays for another season if they do make Champions League, because you can't jump ship. Surely you can't jump ship. I mean, it does happen, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I have thought of one team that he could go to next year, and it's a bit of an outside shot, but Man City. If Guardiola decides, because he looks at the end of his tether, he looks done. If he decides he has had enough, I can see Iraola going to City.
Yeah, so completely agree with all of that. Like I say, I was just sort of eliminating him because I'm not sure he will. Yeah. But if he did, for sure, absolutely. And you know, he's the type of guy that I believe would, if he felt that they could get him, he would step aside. So they got him now.
Yeah.
Don't miss out on him, because you know I believe that Guardiola would want to leave Man City in the right shape moving forward. I could be completely wrong, and he's absolute arse behind the scenes, but that's the impression I get, that actually he would do the right thing by the club.
Yeah.
Like I say, you know, interesting that how far Bournemouth have come, and like I say, you know, unfortunately, no case for Wolves on this one, but nonetheless, this won't be the game that makes or break them, because all the teams down the bottom have got a tough game week, and therefore, actually, it's going to be difficult to see any of them getting points, and therefore, it could very well be as you were at the end of the weekend, very similar to how it was this weekend. We move to the Craven Cottage, Fulham off the back of that slightly surprising victory against Nottingham Forest, host Crystal Palace. This could be another one of them games. It could be any of the three results. Could be high scoring, low scoring. I mean, it is a very, very difficult game to judge. You know, Crystal Palace are up and down. They've had some great results, but they do tend to be over 1.5 goals in Crystal Palace's games, as there are in Fulham's games. So maybe this is over 1.5 goals, and just see how it plays out, rather than trying to predict a winner if you're going to be having a little dabble at the weekend.
Yeah, I think it is quite a tough game to predict, because obviously Palace have had an upturn in form, but Fulham, in my opinion, before last week, they were on the decline. But then when you look at some of the results that they've got, I have changed my opinion. I think Fulham will win this game. You know, at home, Traore, I think they've been worked, as you can tell by some like the match of the day highlights and the comments that they've made. They've really worked on Traore and some of his end products, and I think you are starting to see that. And I've always liked him. I think always like a player that can carry a ball 50 yards, even if he smashes it out for a throw-in afterwards. You get your team up the pitch, which means you don't concede goals. And they just look threatening down both wings now. And they've got backup in Willian now. So I do think that Fulham are in a strong moment here. And I think, you know, that defeat by Everton for Palace, I think that's going to hurt them a little bit. So I would be leaning towards a Fulham home win here.
Yeah, I watched it, the extended, half an hour sort of highlights. And I tell you what, this is the best I've ever seen Traore play across the course of a whole game. You know, like quite often he's obviously an impact sub. He comes on for 10 minutes and makes a bit of a difference. We'll win a free kick or whatever else. I remember, I think he did it for Wolves against Man United. He came on for 10 minutes and, changed the game. but he looked like a threat. I'm still not convinced by his touch or his passing, if I'm honest with you. But he looked like he was. Your point now, I think it looked like they were getting the best out of him, and that's all you can do as a manager, right?
Yeah, I think when they've said they've been working on his end product, I don't think you're ever going to see him whipping in David Beckham crosses, are you?
No.
But what he has learned to do quite well is just stand the ball up into an area. Well, he used to literally just kick it and it'd go out for a goal kick, didn't he? But I noticed most of his crosses were being aimed at sort of middle back of end of the goal back post, but they were all floated. But when you saw some of the people attacking it, Muniz and some of the players, they've got some height in the squad. So I think what they've just done, like I said, is just train him to do the basics. Say, get by your man, just stand it up. And it worked. And I thought he was man of the match by an absolute mile.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good. Like I say, it's one of them players. I don't know. As we've said many times, you can take an instant dislike to a player and for no reason, and you can take an instant like to a player for no particular reason. Trier has always been one of those players that I've always had a bit of a soft spot for.
Yeah, I've always liked him. I just like he's a bit of a throwback, not from like a flair perspective, as in skills wise, but a bit of a throwback flair wise to just what a winger used to be. Just get at your full back and have a go, which you don't see very often.
I also love the nonsense that he doesn't go to the gym. Like, shut up. Like,
and the baby oil as well. That story always comes around, doesn't it? All the while.
I just think he just doesn't look like a football player. Shouldn't be a football player. But the other thing that was evident, actually, really, even in the extended highlights, was actually that Fulham team looked very together. That there was lots of mutual celebration. That makes sometimes when you score a goal and they kind of like high five, and it's like, oh, we've got to celebrate. Like they looked like they were a squad, a team together fighting for the cause.
I noticed that because I think it was the first goal they scored. They ran over to the corner flag, and they've got players in there like Andreas Pereira that a lot of the fans were upset with because he looks like he's trying to find a way out. Yeah. But he was going ballistic, and I was thinking exactly the same. For there's some players who are obviously sitting on the bench. The whole team went ballistic when they scored, and I thought that's great signs for the club, isn't it? They do look a very together team.
Yeah, and I suppose the great news is that if you look on the other side of this game, is that we're not talking about Palace in any way, shape, or form is in danger. They're completely safe. Unfortunately, they are going to do what Palace does, flip-flops on by March and see out the season. But being honest with you, that's probably, sort of 2 months ago, they would have taken that, right?
From the start that they had to the season, they would have absolutely taken that. I think the one person that you need to highlight for Palace is Eze. Having him back at the level that he was is the main reason why they're not firing and scoring goals like they used to. They don't really have that creative spark, do they, to open up teams? They've still got good players, like Mateta scores goals. They've got Sarr, who's got pace on the wing. They've got Kamada, who's very neat and tidy on the ball. They've still got good players, but they need that X factor that they had with Elise and Eze. They just don't have that at the minute. They need Eze to come back, banging form, on fire, creating, dribbling, causing havoc. They just don't have that at the minute.
No, they don't. But nice and safe. And again, another team, the transfer is going to be very interesting. I think there will be some big fish or some big clubs circling their fish. And, Gahi, Lacroix, Eze, even Mateta potentially could be all looked at higher up the food chain. We move to Portman Road. Ipswich host Spurs. Now, this feels like the sort of fixture that 2 or 3 weeks ago, Ipswich would have really fancied their chances. But Spurs, with those players back we spoke about last week, just feels like there's a slightly different feel around the club, doesn't it, moving forward? And this now actually feels like a much tougher game for Ipswich than it would have been even just 10 days ago.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you'll know a bit more than me. Is there any news on any injuries for Spurs? Have they got any more players coming back? Because I know a couple, did they go off injured?
The news coming out of Spurs is that essentially those that were around are still around. No one else coming back. Van der Ven and Romero, I think they're going to hold them back until the international break. It'll be interesting if Romero plays for Argentina before Spurs. That will send those Spurs fans into complete meltdown. The squad will be very similar to how it was last week. But those players, i.e. Adogi, Odebear, are now seen as potentially starting rather than coming off the bench.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I thought the performance against United for Spurs was really good, and it was actually exactly what I expected. I thought they just had far too much going forwards. Somebody who I saw get a bit of stick, Tell, I thought he had a really good game. I've never seen a forward for a long while work as hard as he did. He was a lone player and he worked so hard. I was really impressed with him. He looked very raw and, having pop shots from everywhere. But I thought there was real potential there. And getting quite a lot of those players back with a lot of minutes in the legs is only going to do them good. So, yeah, I think they're a good thing against Ipswich. Ipswich will take a little bit of confidence from last week. They're edging closer to Wolves, but I just feel that Spurs will have a bit too much know-how going forwards. Just be interesting to see if they can cope with Liam Delap defensively.
I was going to try and do that off my own back. I was going to try and do that off my own back. I thought it was quite funny when I messaged you on Saturday saying Rory Delap scored again. Going to Aston Villa, getting a draw is not an easy place to do that. Great result. Obviously, with 10 men for quite a while as well. So really impressive. But this is a sort of bottom 6 team that I think actually Spurs do quite well again, because Ipswich are quite open in their style of play. They're almost going to try and out-football you, aren't they? Whereas, the teams that Spurs struggle against are those that sort of bank up and they've got to try and break down. So this feels like it could be quite an open game to me. Both teams to score over 2.5 goals, that type of a game. But, if you look at all of the teams this season that Ipswich have beaten, there's not many. Spurs are one of them. They could do it again.
Yeah, I think we've got the same read on the game. I think it will be a both teams to score, Spurs win. Is Danso fit? Because I know did he go off with cramp or something? Like if he's fit, I think he's the one that can deal with Delap. He's strong. He's got some pace about him as well. I really like what I've seen from him so far. He's not elite on the ball, but he's good enough on the ball. I think he's only on loan. I don't know if there's an option to buy, but I'd be triggering that straight away. I think he looks a good player.
It's an obligation to buy in the summer, so he is a Spurs player. As is Tell, even though people think that he can pull out, that's a done deal as well. I think
that's a good purchase, because especially with the team that they're playing against Ipswich now as well, Delap has got pace, power. I think Danso is the perfect person to mark him. If he can keep him quiet, I don't think Ipswich have got too much more, especially when you then put in Hutchinson, who's quite creative against Roberto Carlos at left back. Jed Spence, they're going to be going both ways, aren't they? And I don't think Hutchinson will live with Jed Spence.
No, look, and the one that every Spurs fan I've spoken to this week is really excited about is Odebear coming back. Pace, power. If you think about that front three of potentially Kulusevski, or you could even put Johnson back now that he's back, and put Kulusevski back in the middle where he was doing so well at the start of the season.
Did you not think that there was a turning point in the game where United had a fair bit of the ball? They had a spell of about 15, 20 minutes, and then they made a slight tweak and Kulusevski went back into the middle and Spurs dominated again. And I thought it's got to go back to that, because he does look a very different player out wide, doesn't he? And I don't mean he looked quite average out wide.
He's also shattered, right? Many of those Spurs, you could see it, couldn't you? How many of the Spurs players came out. It was just nice to have a couple of days off and not have a midweek fixture. So to have another week of no midweek fixture, I think will do all of them the world of good. And like I say, 2 weeks ago, I would be saying home win probably. But for me, the timing of this game just leans me towards the Spurs, albeit narrow. I think Ipswich will still give them a bloody good game. But, I think, and again, when you start to see those players come back, actually the Spurs squad, when fit, actually is pretty strong.
Well, that was the main reason why, in previous weeks that I've always backed Spurs, because when you look at some of the players, I know they're playing every week and they're knackered, but when you look at the name of the players on paper, they're good players. Then you're adding back in some of the players. James Maddison, I know he's been getting some stick, but when he's good, he's bloody good. The problem is when he's not, he's anonymous. But when he is good, he can completely dictate a game and tempo. And I thought he did that for a large period of the game against United. So if you can get Maddison on form along with Kulusevski, Tell looks a good player. You add in all those players around him, Jed Spence bombing forward. Like there's some serious attacking options there, and you just like to think that they're going to outscore most teams.
Yeah, and of course, all of that, you didn't even mention Dominic Solanke, who's been their talisman all season and actually puts a proper shift in as well. So, good. Again, when we talk about those kind of turning moments in the season, it looks, again, Spurs feel like they potentially can start to look back up the league table. And it could be interesting to see which one of them finishes higher out of them and Everton, just as in a race to the finish. They could have a little battle between themselves. So we move to St Mary's. Again, this feels like another relatively easy game to predict. Southampton host Brighton still at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Great to see so many 3 o'clock kickoffs on a Saturday. Can you see anything other than away win here? Brighton look like they found their mojo again, to use a horrible phrase. They look like they're back in a little bit of form, getting some good results. Obviously, giving Chelsea 2 beatings like the way they did in the last sort of 2 weeks is nothing short of impressive. You could put the 7-0 down to blip, but Brighton look like they're back in the groove to me.
Yeah, I think some of the things that I've seen from Brighton fans is that the manager has just tweaked his tactics a bit. Is that he's just bowling out the same formation and tactics that he's previously done. They seem to have learnt a few lessons. So I think that's a positive for Brighton. I agree that they seem to have found their mojo. If this game would have been 2 weeks ago, I'd have been looking at probably a draw, thinking struggling to break Southampton down, because Southampton have improved defensively. So now I think it's going to be a comfortable game for Brighton. The question is can they break them down early to have that comfort? I think if they score an early goal, I think it's a very, very comfortable game.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to see how we can make a case for any of the bottom 4 to win. You look at this week's fixtures; they play Brighton, Brentford, Spurs, and Bournemouth. If you want to throw West Ham at it as well, they play Arsenal. The bottom 5 have got all of them have got tough games that you can see none of them getting a point out of. So even here, so if you look at if Leicester could get a point against Brentford, if Ipswich could get a point against Spurs, that could actually be massive, because if all the other teams lose, that 1 point does kind of add towards what you're trying to achieve, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, and I mean the main one is if you can get a win as well, can't you? If you can get a win, and get out the bottom 3, especially probably when you look at Leicester at home to Brentford early. That's got to be a game that they target, because when you look at some of the fixtures coming up, it's going to be very hard to see how they win a game. And it's sort of a replication, like you said, for all the other teams. And you'd say, looking at the fixtures, probably Wolves have the hardest fixture. So the 3 below them, it's an opportunity for them to try and pick up a point, isn't it? Or the golden 3 if you can. So yeah, I think from the relegation front, this is a really interesting game week, because like I said, you expect most of them to pick up none, but if somebody can do it, pick up a win, massive implications.
Yeah, it could be a big week for one team. Of course, the way that the way that the games are going right now, being honest, it wouldn't surprise people 4 of them won and they actually nullify each other based on some of the nonsense going on. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see if any of them can sneak on.
Just on the Southampton front, because we don't normally talk a lot about them, because normally we just go, yeah, losing the game, and it sort of comes to fruition. But I do think that they have improved under the new manager. There is signs of improvement. I think there's a pattern of play there. It's not Russell Martin-esque, where it's a very heavy on possession, but they seem to be attacking with wingers. Like they've got the is it Paul Onuachu, I think his name is. He seems to be involved a lot in the play. Like I do feel that they have improved. The question is, are they going to keep him to go into? I'd taken the going into the Championship, but are they going to keep the manager to take them into the Championship and see if they can improve from there? I think he's done enough to warrant, if he just wants to stay, because I think they have improved. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. It's just the start that they have had. It was almost virtually impossible to keep them in the league, wasn't it?
Listen, we all have to take more of just a 1-year approach to our team. If Southampton come up, strengthen the squad, keep the key players, go back to the Championship, go and dominate that next season, come back up, keep the same, you come back 2 years further down the project into the Premier League, not having to go and sort of scramble around for 10 new players at the standard. There is more than one way to become a Premier League team. It doesn't have to be go up, stay up straight away. You can take a slightly more, but I know that we all need to have success today. But, for Southampton, it wouldn't be, and, being honest with you, if I look at the other 2 teams, Ipswich and Leicester, if we assume those 2 go down, it wouldn't surprise me if Southampton came out of that situation the strongest out of the 3 teams.
Well, that's what I was going to just highlight on the 3 that are likely to go down is Southampton and Ipswich, I think, are being set up ready to go again. Leicester, on the other hand, are going to have players on. I mean, there's Connor Cody's on $100,000 a week. Like, they're going to struggle to shift some of these players. There's going to be they're going to be crippled financially, PSR, probably points deductions. So like I said, yeah, Ipswich and Southampton will be set up very well. And I would probably go the other way and say Ipswich probably look the best bet to go up, because I think they've signed a lot of Championship level players. So yeah, like I said, I think the clubs do need to identify what the actual plan is. And, are you coming up with the plan of spending big to stay up, and having a bit of a risk, or are you going to do some forward thinking and sign some players ready for next season to be able to go back again?
Yeah, I've also watched Leeds Sunderland, which obviously had a great ending, but both of those teams are miles off of anywhere near being Premier League ready. Any of those teams coming up are going to have to spend a serious amount of money to even get close.
Well, I'm going to remind you about the pre-season bet that I put on. It was 7-1 for both the three promoted teams to be relegated. I'm telling you now, next year that's not 7-1, is it?
No.
I think it's gonna happen for the second season running next year. It's got to be 2-1, near enough even money. Because, like you said, I can't see any of the promoted teams coming up being good enough with another year's worth of investment in Wolves, Everton, all the teams around there. There's no way they're going to have enough unless they go and spend ridiculous amounts of money and break PSR.
Well, like you say, even the teams that we were banishing around foolishly at the start of the season, Palace, Forest, Fulham, all of those teams,
A mile off
Bournemouth,
there.
Everton, they're all absolutely, like you rightly say, life, just gazillion miles ahead. But that's not for today. That's for next season. Just enjoy your season in the Premier League would be my advice, because you're probably only going to get one. We moved to Saturday night at Villa Park. Feels like there's been lots of evening kickoffs at Villa Park recently. They host Chelsea. This one's a really, really interesting game. For both of them, obviously, kind of in and around the Champions League spot. How much pressure do you think? And we've been on here sort of talking about what a great job Maresca's done, and how he's calmed it all down. And he's under pressure now, isn't he? Because actually, they're on a bad run of form. Players that were getting them out of jail in Cole Palmer look, like a bang average player for the time being. But they're losing games that you didn't expect them to lose. To go and get pumped 3-0 by Brighton and not really lay a finger on them. They're now down to 6th. Is there pressure building on Maresca?
I think there's huge pressure building on Maresca. I noticed the same sort of pattern when he was at Leicester at the back end of the season. Some of the fans were calling for him to be sacked. Now, the reason was because he was stubborn and wasn't willing to adapt and change, which was being thrown at the Brighton manager. It's been thrown at various other managers. But if you're not willing to adapt when things are going wrong, they're only going to keep getting the same outcome. So I think there is serious pressure. I understand that he's not got forward at the minute and those sorts of things, but there's players in the squad that can play that position. But they're using the same patterns of play, which obviously in the Premier League, elite coaches are going to clock onto what you're doing and be able to put a defensive structure and tactic in to counteract it. There just doesn't seem to be any variation for me. It is quite obvious what he's doing. They isolate the wingers and try and get one-on-one, but all teams are doing now, doubling up on the wingers. And there's no space. There's no space in behind. Like, I think it's very easy to play against Chelsea. And, I don't think Villa are in the best form at the minute, but I can't see how they don't win this game.
I think it's interesting when we move on to Nottingham. I think Nottingham Forest have got a similar problem, albeit very different in the sense I think people are starting to work out how to play against Nottingham Forest, and they're starting to kind of struggle. Okay, I know they beat Brighton 7-0 the other week, but like Nottingham Forest games are getting closer and closer because I think teams have started to work out what they do, and I think you're absolutely right. Chelsea are exactly the same, and even Pep Guardiola sort of adapts his system and his shape depending on who he's playing against, how they're getting on, who he's got. I think sometimes. For example, and again, this is a really bad example, but if Chelsea were playing with a big target man and you're playing with Christopher and Nkunku up front, you can't keep putting the ball in the box in the air. But I think that they would still do that because that's what their system. And you'd expect Nkunku to win the headers. Like, in me, he's an absolute baller. And Nkunku was one of the players I've been most excited about coming into the Premier League in recent times. And I just feel like they're not getting the best out of him. And actually, Cole Palmer looks like he needs a rest. Too much pressure. He looks disinterested. He looks, I don't know what, he just looks like a completely different player from last year. And I think Chelsea could do with a little bit of a shake-up and just give it a different look and feel.
Well, I think the whole letting João Felix go now looks ridiculous. Like you said, they should be just going to Cole Palmer, have 2 weeks off, João Felix, or even Nkunku. He can play in that role. Like, someone go and have a go in that role because he does look shot at the minute mentally, doesn't he? He looks completely gone. Like, where he had that zip where he was driving with the ball, he's doing everything slowly at the minute. So I think he is one of the biggest problems Chelsea have got because they've relied so heavily upon him for, pretty much a year now, over a year, and he's not performing. Chelsea players are looking around, they're going, who's going to drag us out of this? Because it has been you.
Yeah, but I would also say for me that you look at their kind of wing players. You've got Sancho, obviously Woodridge, obviously gone through whatever he's going through right now. I don't know enough detail to comment. Neto and Nkunku, Madawaki, none of them are actually, in my opinion, elite. But they've made Pedro Neto look. It's almost like they're kind of going, right, we bought you for this, right? We know you're really good at that, but we're going to want you to do this.
I remember having an argument with the Wolves fans around Pedro Neto, and they were going, "Oh, he's unbelievable." And I was thinking, he's a good player, but he's not elite. He doesn't score you goals. Yes, he dribbles with the ball very well. He's like a Traore to me. he's like an Adama Traore. I don't think he's got the end product to be able to say that he's an elite level winger. I think Noni Madueke's got a lot more about him. He'll dribble with the ball and he's got a bit more end product about him. Like I just don't think he's of the level, if I'm being honest. He's a Chelsea squad player to me, Pedro Neto.
See, for me, I couldn't disagree with you. Like, for me, I'd have Neto over Madueke every day of the week. But again, I'd have Neto on the right hand side, not the left where they're playing him. He is
He should definitely be on the right, cutting inside. Yeah.
And like I say, Aston Villa have sort of become a bit. Have they become a bit? Am I right? I think they've become a bit irrelevant. They're not quite there. They're not quite there. They're still in the Champions League, but actually, they're just a little bit.
They're heavily reliant on the Champions League campaign. I think, not being in it for a while, it's almost took their eye off the ball a bit, haven't they? They have become the model of consistency last season to now the level of inconsistent, the definition of inconsistent. They could turn up one week and look unreal, and the next week you just go, that was Aston Villa last year, who would turn up every single week, machine-like, not concede goals. Like, the one thing that I've noticed is like Martinez, how many goals does he concede now? And it's not his fault, by the way, just in general, the defence. Like, last year, they were an absolute rock. Every week they concede a goal. Martinez has gone from someone you wanted in your fantasy team to get him as far away as possible.
Well, I think the best way to sum Aston Villa up before we move on is that they've played in their last two games, Wolves and Ipswich, and they've got 1 point. And that is, in this league, this season, absolutely criminal if you've got any intention of looking upwards. And actually, you look at that now, they're drifting off of the Champions League spots. They're now, albeit 5 points away from even being considered. But there's some good teams in and around them they've got to get above as well. So I think this could very easily drift into a bit of, and I think if they don't go deep into the Champions League, which they could do because there's been some funny results, one of Man City and Real Madrid are going out. Bayern Munich just scratched through, AC Milan are out. If they, I don't know what their quarter of the draw looks like, but if they get a little bit lucky with that, they could go deep, and that's where they should probably focus their attention because the league looks like it's.
I think that's what they've done, haven't they? They're chucking all their eggs in that basket, to be honest, which is not a bad thing. For teams like Villa, it's very, and I don't mean that because they're a small club, but when you don't make the Champions League regularly, you've almost got to have a full tilt it, haven't you? Especially when you qualify, like you've got to have a proper go. It's a fair play, but I mean, I've just gone back a bit further through their results, and they drew with Arsenal, which was was not a bad result, but they drew with West Ham. West Ham are poor, and lost to Wolves, drew with Ipswich, like. I mean, I'm now rethinking my prediction for beating Chelsea, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good at the minute. The only thing I'm thinking is the two new signings that they've got, from what I've seen of them, do look like they're making an impact. And if they chuck them in, I think they probably could have a bit too much going forward for Chelsea.
We shall see. Really interesting day Sunday. I'm looking forward to sort of, sitting down on that sofa, not moving much, and looking forward to both of these games for different reasons. Newcastle host Nottingham Forest at St James's Park, of course, famously, it feels like just yesterday on that Boxing Day game when Nottingham Forest went there and Chris Wood scored a hat-trick. So it's a place where Nottingham Forest will have some good memories of, and both teams maybe not quite firing on all cylinders. We were both absolutely gobsmacked by the Newcastle result against Man City last week. We built a case of actually expecting or thinking Newcastle might win it. How much of a body blow do you think that was for Newcastle for the sort of the Champions League running?
I think it's a huge body blow, especially as, I think quite a lot of people had the opinion that Newcastle might get something there. It was the goals that they conceded, though. It was dreadful. Like, there was one where Kieran Trippier's just jumped and it went over his head. And I was like, what are you doing? It just wasn't from what we've expected of Newcastle of late, especially defensively. Like, they've been the one that you've banked on for clean sheets, with the exception of Burnley, by the way. But it just wasn't a performance. I mean, I'm going to go with the route of I'm going to write that result off and just say it was a one-off because I've not seen it on too many occasions recently. So I'm going to be back in Newcastle. But I think it is a worry because it was a strange performance.
So, but that's interesting because I think you're being blinded by. So if you look at their last four, and I'm going to chuck 5 in there in the FA Cup. They lost 4-1 to Bournemouth. They beat Southampton 3-1 but went 1-0 down. They lost to Fulham 2-1. Obviously got pumped 4-0 and they only just squeezed past Birmingham in the FA Cup as well. This for me isn't a blip. This for me is actually part of the new way of where Newcastle are actually at. They're missing a couple of players and actually they have become quite average again.
Yeah, I mean, they're very heavily reliant on Isak, aren't they, to be honest, and Gordon to penetrate and score goals. So, Yeah, I mean, I'm also then looking at Forest and thinking they've dipped slightly as well, haven't they? So, I mean, it's an interesting game. Definitely, I mean, it's got potential to be an interesting game. I don't know whether the style of Forest play will play into Newcastle's hands and allow them a bit more of the ball and get settled.
I'm going to make a weird statement here, which will no doubt come back and bite. But whoever wins is still in with the running for Champions League. Whoever loses isn't.
Mm.
Because I think this will be a real momentum stopper and blocker. And you look at Nottingham Forest, if they lose, Man City could go above them. Bournemouth could go within 1 point of them. Newcastle will be obviously much closer to them. Whereas if Newcastle lose and other games go against them, they could find themselves quite easily 5, 6, 7, 8 points away, and actually they need to get their form back. So I think for me, this is a bigger game than they think, but maybe for different reasons. And the loser could well be out of the race for Champions League football.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Forest have obviously got a little bit of a buffer, haven't they? But if they need to just, I think
But I could,
a point wouldn't be a bad result, would it, for Forest? I think they'd take that now, going away to Newcastle. Probably take a point.
yeah, I think this could be a low score. I've got to be honest with you, I think this could be a low scoring game. Personally, I think this could be. I see Nottingham Forest setting up very similar to how we were moaning about Bayern Munich against Leverkusen last weekend. I could see Nottingham Forest absolutely doing something very similar. But the big game of the weekend, we go to the Etihad. Manchester City, off the back of that 4-0 win against Newcastle, obviously in a good spot, a bit of confidence. Obviously, we yet to see how they get on against Real Madrid in the Champions League, which could add further excitement to that. Mamouche looked like the player that everybody was telling me he looked like in Germany. Obviously, he's still the second highest scorer in Germany. He is a goal scorer, and it looks like he just took the time to find his feet. But, he scored a hat-trick in the Premier League before Saka.
Yeah, yeah, fair. I mean, Saka's a little bit different, and but yeah, I mean, it's not taking him long. I'm still yet to be. I know he scored a hat trick. I'm still yet to be convinced because, I mean, he takes pop shots from everywhere. So, like, no wonder he's going to score the odd goal here and there. But I'm yet to be convinced. I think this will be the test of where he is as a player for me. And don't get me wrong, I'd love to be. I'm not saying I'm writing him off or anything before people jump on it. I just want to see what he's about. I want to see more of him, and I think this is the real test of where we're going to see where some of those players like Kusanov as well. Wasn't tested. I thought Isak had given him a real test. They hardly had the ball, so he wasn't tested. So again, let's see what they're like against Liverpool, some of these new players. And I hope some of them are really good players because you want to see top players in the Premier League. I just want to see them do it against the top teams. I think it's a great game, obviously, because it's two great sides. But
Yeah, which doesn't always mean a great game. But yes, I know what you're saying.
It's got some real interesting points to it, hasn't it? It's not the old Man City versus Liverpool. It's a new version.
Well, yeah, but I think you're right in the sense that some of those new players, Gonzalez, obviously we spoke about him last week. Is he going to come back? Come back looks like he's added a dimension. Like I say, I thought John Stones also looked good when he played in the Champions League. But this is actually potentially a pivotal moment in the league because actually, do you think that and we think Arsenal will beat West Ham, obviously that would put them on 56 points. If Manchester City could beat Liverpool, that would leave Liverpool on 60 points. So that would draw it down to 4 points. Could that start to make Liverpool feel a bit nervous? Could that start to add a little bit more tension to those games? Do you think that those new signings actually will give Man City that impetus to go and actually? And of course, I don't know. Man City aren't particularly fond of either Arsenal or Liverpool currently, but Man City aren't going to want to go out without a fight here, are they?
I think this has got a real interesting sort of side to it because I think the biggest player that's come into that team is Gonzalez, and I think he's played the Rodri role very well and allowed them to tick, and that's what then meant people like Marmoush and other players have shone. So I think that's the biggest thing to highlight of Man City. I actually think that they're going to beat Liverpool, and but I don't think it's going to open up the title race. Who's catching them? Arsenal with the front 3-4, if you include Mourinho, they haven't got enough to go on a streak of winning games. I don't think. Forest, they're not going to do it. Man City are too far behind. I don't think it's going to have an impact. I think Liverpool can afford to lose this game and still be fine.
Completely agree on everything you've just said there, which may lead you to where I'm going to go with the result as well. I think you're absolutely right. I think this is still too big of a buffer. Like you say, if Arsenal were flying, had whoever it is, Gabriel Jesus, doesn't matter, pick a forward, flying, scoring 3-4 goals every other week. Like they're just, like you say, to be relying on, as much as I was impressed with Mourinho, to be relying on Mourinho to be a centre forward with all these games. They've still got Champions League games to play as well. So that, who's not to say they won't pick up more injuries? Yeah. It just feels like that squad is nowhere near.
Doesn't it then just scream how bonkers that January window was for Arsenal? If they'd have gone and picked up a forward on loan of quality, they'd have been fine.
Look, mate, I think lots of teams will regret not moving quicker. And you look at what Manchester City done. It's not going to win Manchester City the league, but what they did was they highlighted players that will add value over the course of their contract, not just for here and now. They've immediately made an impact on that team, and I now expect Manchester City to go on a bit of a run. They can keep those players fit and free, and it wouldn't surprise me if they go to the Bernabeu and turn it around.
Yeah.
But I think that Manchester City have made the right additions at the right price that will be around for a while. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how that one plays out. But we now swing back to what we do every week in our predictions. We go all the way back to Friday nights, where Leicester hosts Brentford, 8 p.m. kickoff at King Power. You've gone for your banker of the week, so we know where you're going, but what's the score going to be?
Leicester won't score at home again. Leicester 0, Brentford 2.
It's what I have. Lock it in. It's going to happen. Exactly that, 0-2. At least one headed goal for Brentford as well. My banker of the week, get them both out of the way nice and early. Everton at home to Manchester United, Goodison Park, 12:30 kick on Saturday. The score will be
Everton 3, Man U 1.
You just took my breath away there. Everton scoring 3 goals in a game. I think that's crazy. I mean, it's just banker, but not. I'm going to go 2-0 Everton. I think defensively there'll be 2 on Branthwaite. Looks like an absolute man mountain. As the right back looks huge. Isn't it? Was his name of Brian or something?
Oh yeah, I know you mean. He's massive, isn't he?
Jeez, I was like,
Dan Burn-esque, isn't it, playing fullback?
That'd be a good battle. I could see that in like a Royal Rumble type of affair. Anyway, moving on. Arsenal host West Ham at the Emirates, 3:00 kickoff. The score will be
Arsenal 1, West Ham 0.
Yeah. I'm going to go 2-1 Arsenal in the hope that it's an entertaining game for the fans. But yeah, I can see it being low scoring potentially. I may have gone too high with the goals. Bournemouth host Wolves at the Vitality, 3:00 still Saturday. The score will be
Bournemouth 3, Wolves 1.
I don't see Wolves scoring, but I'm going to go 2-0 Bournemouth.
You're liking your 2-0s today?
Yeah, well, I'd love to say there's a logic behind it. There's really not. This is completely off the cuff. This one, I've got no idea. This one is going to be a complete guess. Fulham host Crystal Palace, Craven Cottage, 3:00 kickoff. The score will be
I'm going to go Fulham 2, Palace 1.
I got no. Literally, I'm going to go 1-0. No, based on just I'm literally sitting on the fence. I've got no idea. I can see that being anything. Still at 3:00 Saturday, Portman Road, Ipswich. I'm sure Ed Sheeran will be somewhere. I don't know if he's an Ipswich fan. Host Spurs. The score will be
Ipswich 1, Spurs 2.
Yeah, I feel this is going to be 2-3. I feel it's going to be a real entertaining game. I can see loads of goals. 2-3 to Spurs. The last 3:00 kickoff at St Mary's, Southampton host Brighton in a South Coast derby, if that's a thing. The score will be
Southampton 0, Brighton 2.
I'm going to go 1-3. Yeah, I think Southampton will score. Brighton do give away chances still, but I think Brighton will have more than enough. We move to the Midlands, Villa Park, 5:30 kickoff. Aston Villa host Chelsea. The score will be.
You talked me out of the Villa win, so I'm going to go 1-1. I'm
sorry, I didn't mean to. I feel bad now.
If that costs me every result, I'm coming for you.
You're a grown man. Make your own decisions. Stand up for yourself. I don't even remember what I said that was that convincing about Aston Villa being bad or Chelsea being good, because I haven't got a clue what's going to go on here. I do see Villa just about having enough, but I think this could be actually quite dull. I'm going to go 1-0 Aston Villa. We move to Sunday night. As I've said, I'm actually genuinely looking forward to both of these games. I think both of these games are going to be really interesting tactically and emotionally as well. Can Nottingham Forest, keep themselves together, being that high in the league? Can Newcastle come back? It is at St James's Park at 2:00 kickoff. What would the score be, Fran?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the home team. I'm going to go Newcastle 2, Forest 1.
I'm going to go 2-2. I think that this could be a really interesting game, but I think there will be goals. And then we wrap up the game week, 4:30 kickoff. The Etihad, Manchester City host Liverpool. The score will be
Man City 2, Liverpool 1.
I've also got Man City. I'm going to go 3-1 to Manchester City. They are also, by the way, in my £5 challenge, which, if you're interested, is Everton, Bournemouth, Brighton, and Manchester City. £5 would return £82 to 21.
So Everton, Bournemouth, Brighton, and City.
Yeah.
My £5 challenge is Everton, Bournemouth, Brighton, and Brentford.
Oh, Oh, we didn't know. We didn't know.
No.
Oh, interesting.
Mine pays £67.84.
Oh,
I mean, I have chucked in the early kickoff, which is worrying because you just never know, do you? And
yeah.
it could go down early doors. But no, very similar to you. I think we're on the same thoughts.
Fantastic, Fran. Really enjoyed that. Where can people reach out and find us?
So to listen to the episode, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, and we're also on YouTube. YouTube seems to be going quite well, by the way. Just search for The Atmosphere is Electric. You'll be able to find the channel and listen to any of the episodes. We are on X, we're on Facebook, and we're also on TikTok. Again, search for The Atmosphere is Electric or TAIE podcast. You'll be able to find us. Just reach out. You can DM us, reply to any of our tweets. The X Twitter channel is growing quite quickly. It's getting quite a lot of responses as well. So yeah, and if you want to come on as a guest, you're more than welcome.
As always, Fran, favourite hour of the week. Well done, buddy. Enjoyed that. Look forward to next week. Take care, mate. Have a great one.